Welcome to Bloody Good Horror, covering the best and worst of the horror genre since Halloween 2007. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello everybody and welcome to another exciting episode of Bloody Good Horror. Tonight will be terrifying because we will be discussing a Terrifier. A Dread Central Presents Terrifier, Joe, actually is the name.
Oof, I don't want to sound like a dick, but did that throw anybody off right from the beginning?
Yes.
Good boy.
We can talk about it, but the only other thing I got going on tonight is that if we don't get off by 9:30, I'm quitting this podcast forever, and that's going to be it. So there you go.
Well, you don't have John synopsize.
We went till 9:45 last week, and I thought I was going to die.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we don't have John this week.
That's true. We have
Between Casey and I, we'll probably say 5 words, so I think we'll be good.
I got stuff to do afterwards, so yeah, let's go.
We have less emails, so get ready for a hot banger, people.
Yeah.
A hot banger.
Joining me tonight, first up from Hot Atlanta, Georgia.
Home of the hot banger.
She is the priestess of books and smart things at bloodygoodhorror.com. Also, we're learning, one hell of a painter. Please welcome Cece Riot to the show.
Oh, thank you.
Is there somebody else you know who lives in Atlanta and reads books and is a painter? You looked around like that wasn't going to be it.
Well, I was just like, well, okay. Thank you. It's very nice and flattering of you to say.
Next up on the show, coming from Indiana, drinking wild turkey like a Midwestern boy. Please welcome Casey to the show.
What, no comments on my painting?
It's beautiful. Sick
So
Batman
good.
shirt.
I'm envious.
And last up tonight on the show, seems like he's playing a little bit of a dual role here because he is a fan of Disney. He does live in Chicago, but he's also drinking wine, so I feel like he's bringing a little schnorr to the show tonight. Please welcome Joe.
It is World Goth Day. Greetings and felicitations, children of technology.
Yeah, it is World Goth Day, and we've been sharing goth dancing gifts. Really, it allowed us to revisit that wonderful video from, I don't know, somewhere in Scandinavia, I guess is probably where that came from. The famous.
Should we need Azrael Abyss gifts?
Easy, what did you pick up from Hot Topics today?
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an honest to goodness former goth in the house tonight.
Yes. I mean,
What kind-
I don't say former, just because I was never like a practicing outward goth. I've always been a very internalized goth.
You're just insides are black.
Yes.
Have you seen SLC Punk? SLC Punk. You don't have to wear the uniform.
Yeah, so I never wore the uniform, but I've very much always been a goth.
If
so.
you had to put yourself in a goth subgenre, what would it be?
Ooh.
Like a mall goth?
Gothlet.
I think you're gothish.
Like a dark priestess?
I mean, I would say mall goth because, I mean, we have malls in.
Okay, here's a question. Have you ever worn non-functional chains on your clothing?
Oh.
No.
Okay. Have you ever worn...
How many lunch boxes do you own?
I own lunch bags. Is that
No. Have you ever
owned a pair of Junkos?
Sure.
No. I've owned several pair of platform buckled up like leather boots.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
That counts.
And I still own several of them.
Have you ever worn white?
Now
Have you ever worn white face paint for no discernible reason whatsoever?
For no reason? No. Have I worn it for a reason? Yes.
Okay. I'm not sure what to do with that.
Was it Halloween?
No, it's Tuesday.
Maybe. No, there's been a few times that I've worn face paint for reasons other besides Halloween, but it was definitely during college.
So there you go. Cece's goth status confirmed, in case anybody
Yes.
was wondering. Hey,
It's
Joe.
there.
Joe.
I'm glad you had 3 middle-aged white guys to judge that for you.
Yeah.
You know, you work with what you're given, and obviously this is
Hey,
this is my path.
I own every Typo Negative album on CD. All right.
Yeah.
Every
Also,
what
like,
album?
Typo Negative.
Oh.
Really?
I love it.
Joe, do you want to?
I mean, technically, Kyle did. I mean, Portishead really isn't goth, but I will say that Kyle's podcast Tune Dig put out an episode in honor of a more darkish music route.
So not to get off topic, but I listened to his podcast and I had never listened to Portishead. So I put on that album while we were like doing stuff around the house, and then like 4 songs in, Leslie's like, "What the hell are we listening to here?"
That's not a good just like around the house album.
Yeah, it's like, are you trying to like get laid midday or something?
we
Our daughters.
angling for a little afternoon delight there, Joe.
Love it.
Joe, do you want to talk about how you hurt my feelings this weekend
What? How did I hurt your
by
feelings?
running a marathon and not telling anyone?
I mean, I'm sure at some point I mentioned that I was training, but
Nah, nope.
I mean,
I would
Yeah,
remember
you talk
that.
about it all the time on Slack.
well, yeah, that's true. Like Sophie and I were talking about it because she was training for one. I mean, I don't know. It was out in the burbs by me. There was literally like probably 300 people that ran it. It wasn't like it was the Chicago or any like big
It
thing.
was just funny. Like after talking to you, totally. It was just about something about my reaction. Like obviously not paying attention on Slack, but like, and you've ran marathons before, so I get what you're saying. But something about just opening up Instagram, whatever it was, like was it Monday morning or something, and seeing this picture of you running a marathon, I instantly was like, was he not going to tell me that he's running a marathon?
You know what's funny is mile like 8, I think it was, I get a notification and like I keep Leslie up to date so she can like meet me at the end. I get a notification, I assume it's her, and I look down, nope. It's a text from Cece and her husband about some Baja that they found in
I just wanted to let you know we were thinking about you.
I was like running, I'm like, I can't reply to this right now.
You know who wasn't thinking about you? Me, because I didn't know that I was supposed to be. So
See?
I immediately got online, sent an email, and I was just like, it's okay, Joe, no worries. It's not like we are friends who talk online for 90 minutes every week.
I don't know, I mean like
Let's be honest. This is Joe's 6th marathon.
Yeah.
It's not that big a surprise. I think if I
Listen.
ran a marathon Sunday, didn't tell anybody, it'd be pretty surprising.
I don't care how many times it happens. The fact that Joe runs a marathon, I will always find impressive.
yeah. Well,
So.
it's like if John had another kid this weekend. You'd be like, all right, well. Yeah. I equate my marathons to John's kids at this point.
I also noticed.
I wonder though. That's a good point though. I wonder if I know your marathons since we've started this show has now surpassed John's.
Mm.
I think.
Oh, I think John's only done one.
Yeah, 1 or 2.
Only one.
I feel like you look like you're in pretty good shape right now, Joe. Like I feel like there's definitely been marathons in the past where you were just going hard before, and like
Going hard.
The trouble with training is like it spans months. And this one I was definitely like I'm not in great shape. Like I pretty much sign up for these things to force myself to train to balance out the awful like eating and drinking that I do. This one I was definitely like more prepared for any other, and like I actually beat my best time by like a half an hour.
wow,
which
that's
I was
crazy. Did you cheat?
I know,
Accidentally?
No, I don't know. Like I read a lot more about like, eating right the few days leading up, because normally like I'm terrible with like
Joe's like, wait a minute, you're not supposed to drink?
well I'm terrible with like doing any research, so I'm like, I don't know, you eat pasta the night before and then you're pretty much ready. But like this one, like I actually like staggered carbs like throughout the week and like trained a little better. So
It's like that episode of The Office where Michael's eating fettuccine alfredo right before the 5K.
exactly.
Yeah.
I remember my first one, it was the New York City Marathon. I was on the bus out to the start line and I was sitting across from this guy that I started making small chat with. He's like, so you have like the energy chews or like the goo and stuff for like while you're running? I'm like, no, I don't know. What is that? Like I had like nothing. I was not prepared at all. Like, and
Yeah, so the longest that I've ever ran is like 6 miles. And that was the point at which I was like, if I'm going to run this far, I need like food. I need like some type of like calories in the middle of it,
whenever I do like a longer one, it's like every 45 minutes you take something.
Also, my wife just texted me from the other room. Joe and I are better friends than you and Joe, with a screenshot of a Facebook conversation with you guys talking about you running this marathon. So
Oh, yeah.
Oh man, I love it.
So there you go.
It's amazing.
There you go.
That is true because I did
Yeah.
I use Runkeeper, and for whatever reason you cannot turn off it posting to Facebook even if like you disconnect your account.
Yeah.
So it posted like one of my morning runs, and we started talking about it.
Thin walls in this apartment. Anyway,
Yeah.
Joe, we all here at Bloody Good Horror, all of your friends congratulate you.
Thank you.
Yes,
So there you go.
congrats.
Nice work.
And to finish up, congrats. Sophie sent you a text later on to finish up your your success by a tattoo of Dave Matthews Band that we saw while at a brewery.
I was trying to find. I actually, the first time my wife and I went to Madison, Wisconsin, the first thing I saw when we stepped out of the car was somebody with a Dave Matthews, like the exact same
Oh
tattoo.
my god,
I was trying to find to send back, but just never got
it
to
was
it.
god awful.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
I think
I
for
didn't have to imagine I
Like
saw it.
I have
being
like my
up close.
tattoos. My tattoos are pretty late '90s. Like they're pretty just like from that era, but they're not like a band. Like that's such a commitment.
you're taking like a big risk,
Right.
like
Yeah.
unless that band is like broken up and like all the members are dead. Like you get like a Ramones
Like,
tattoo now. And,
What
like,
if
be okay,
the
but-
what
I
if,
still regret to this day my Spice Girls tattoo.
Yeah,
like what if you had a Cosby Show tattoo?
exactly.
Or like what if the lead singer turns out to be a monster and you're just like,
Well, so the violinist just got accused of sexual misconduct.
Yeah, they booted him out of the band. for
Yeah,
it.
oh jeez.
so it's crazy out there.
Yeah, like
Like
you never know, especially in this day and age. Like
Oh, yeah.
something's gonna come out.
When and that's the thing is like you never could have predicted that in the. I mean, you could have, but you wouldn't have. Like in the late '90s,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah,
Just like I don't know, man. They're the voice of a generation. I just feel like I need to commemorate them.
I loved all his movies, so I got a Harvey Weinstein
Harvey
tramp stamp, and like
Now
the-
look at
I got the
I
Weinstein.
thought I was safe.
Got the Weinstein Co. logo on my ankle.
Well, even like, I mean, when all that stuff about Garrison Keeler came out, like I had all these
yeah.
pictures like where I met him, and like I was so happy to see him, and I'm looking through Facebook, I'm like, all right, great, like now these are all up there. You never know.
Thanks, Garrison Keeler, is what Joe's trying to say. Thanks.
Fucking ass. Like that broke my goddamn heart.
That was a sad one.
Cece,
Yes.
tweet with BGH coming up.
Yes. So Tweet with BGH is this coming Sunday, and it is going to be the remake of Cabin Fever, and that is streaming on Netflix. It is starting at 8 p.m. Eastern, and it is Memorial Day weekend, so you'll have Monday off, which means
You could drink.
you can drink.
Which
you can,
You're probably gonna need to make it through the Cabin Fever remake, from what I hear.
yeah. I mean, it's
I
rough.
think the drinking game should go up tomorrow.
Yes.
Or no, Thursday, right?
Thursday, yes,
Yeah.
it goes up on Thursday.
BGH Thirsty Thursdays.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So,
did
yeah.
Joe, did the whole new class get like a personalized text about your marathon, or was it just Sophie?
No, Sophie was asking about like training and stuff, so we were talking about that. I think
Also-
really it was only Sophie that knew.
Also, I
Okay.
noticed you're rocking the weird compression sleeve things now.
Yeah, that was actually the first time I used those on for like my calves, and like they're supposed to help with shin splints, and they were awesome.
Wait, so you didn't wear them in any of the training runs, and then just decided to wear a new thing during the marathon?
Yeah, like the day before, Leslie. They're actually like Leslie's. I borrowed, and I'm like, I don't even think these are gonna fit, and like they barely did. But
So
she's
you
like,
borrowed
"Yeah."
them, stretched them out, and made them disgusting, and now gave
Yeah,
them
it
back.
ruined them. Like, here, these are yours.
It's like, sorry,
but
honey,
yeah.
there was only I didn't have any socks, so now I'm ruining your socks. Sorry.
Yeah, you look like a mental patient, but they help. So.
Very nice. Thank you for that. Speaking of drinking, that was like two topics ago, but still, Joe, what are we drinking while we review Terrifier? Beer guts.
Terrifier, a creepy little tale about a clown that's gonna go around and terrify some people. That's pretty much your summary right there. In honor of that, I picked a beer from the fine folks at Only Child Brewing, which is out in beautiful Gurnee, Illinois. And this is their beer, Night Terrors, which makes perfect sense. It's a black IPA, which I've spoken about a handful of times, kind of like a mix of a porter and an IPA. This one really well balanced. You kind of get that malty, sort of roasted barley flavor up front, and then those hops kind of slide right in at the end. Both aren't like overpowering by any means, but they mix really well. I think I've talked about this a bunch of times. Like it's one of my favorite styles of beer, and I'm really happy that it's getting more and more popular. This one comes in at about 7.2% alcohol, so it's up there. You know, you have 3 or 4 of these over the weekend, and you know, maybe don't drive the kids down to the old ballpark to watch the game with the fun and the whatnot. That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about these a few times, so not a ton to say about them, but Only Child is great. They don't distribute very far. They're kind of up and coming, but if you can find their stuff, I definitely suggest it. Onlychildbrewing.com is their website, and yeah, short, simple, to the point.
Thank you for that, Joe. That's the beer
Thank you.
recommendation, something you get here every week on Bloody Good Horror. Joe, I just want you to know that so far the entire episode, and probably for the rest of it, that I've had the picture and the video of the frog stuck in the witch's cleavage from from the Black Cauldron. So
The Black Cauldron, yeah. It's a classic.
I'm thinking about that movie before I watched The Terrifier, which is now occupying my brain. I thought a lot about the Black Cauldron last week. It's pretty out there.
We got really good feedback on that episode too. I think a lot of people really liked it.
I was just blown away by your knowledge and like you taking something seriously. It was really fascinating. So
It was a little Will Ferrell at the end of what's that movie where he kind of like blacks out and you know what am I talking about here? You guys know?
Old School?
Old School, yeah, where he just like
Yeah.
blacks out and kind of gives an explanation of
Oh,
whatever
at the
he's doing.
very end, yes,
Yeah.
during the like IQ, the thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever that is.
All right, guys, it is time. Let's take a quick break and discuss Terrifier.
This is it, Jennifer. Your big break in TV. Welcome to prime time, bitch. Main feature.
And we're back. Joe,
Oh, fuck you.
you're on a roll tonight. So let's talk about Terrifier. I'm gonna have Joe synopsize it, but I did want to mention that, as we mentioned, this is a Dread Central Presents. I always like to say when Dread Central comes up that some of the guys involved in this site, some of the people go way back to the Creature Corner days. I don't know if that rings a bell, Joe, but that was like one of my, when I first started getting into internet horror in like 2001. That was one of the sites I used to frequent a lot. And when they broke up, some of the people went on to form Dread Central. So I kind of have a connect with them way back in the day. So yeah, but they're kind of getting into the Bloody Disgusting game now, picking up indie movies. And so this, we'll just mention, was based off of this director previously did an anthology film. I don't know if anybody has the name of that in front of them. I guess not. And this clown thing was like one of the stories in the anthology.
So was that I can't
Was that-
remember, but I know that it was part of All Hallows Eve. Is that the name
There
of
you
it? The anthology?
Sure. Sounds cool.
Yeah,
So
that's
yeah,
what it
so
is.
this is like the full movie version. Joe, why don't you tell me the plot?
So it's actually, I was dreading synopsizing, but it's pretty straightforward. It's Halloween night. We've got these 2 gals, Dawn and Tara, I believe are their names, kind of coming home from a party or about to get in their car. They decide to go to a pizza shop and kind of sober up and encounter this creepy clown with his plastic bag of tricks. Pretty much have like a 5-minute or 10-minute encounter where he's just kind of staring at him, doing creepy stuff. And then he proceeds to kind of terrorize them for the rest of the night, chase them around. We encounter a few other folks. The clown's name is Art, which I don't know if we ever actually get in the movie, but according to the IMDb Bizzles, that's his name. And yeah, I mean, they end up in sort of this apartment building, I think it is, type object.
It's just like
and-
it's like a dilapidated shithole base. Like it was probably apartments at some point and is now just
Yeah.
like the worst like horror movie 1980s New York City looking dump.
Yeah. So the whole kind of plot is Tara calls her sister to come pick her up because they get a flat tire, presumably because Art the Clown had flattened their tire. And while they're waiting, he's kind of chasing them around and, you know, encountering other people that are in the building, and hilarity ensues.
Yes, hilarity.
So I think it covers it.
Yeah. All right, Cece, what did you think of Terrifier?
So I had seen All Hallows Eve like
Oh, you
a
have?
really long. Do what?
Did you like it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember a whole lot about like what is actually happening, except that I remembered the clown was super super creepy, and I really liked that. So when we heard about this on the show, and I hadn't seen anything about it when I looked it up, I was looking forward to it, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. It is very gory. I wouldn't say really like over the top violent, just they like to do the bucket of blood.
It's got a few moments.
Kind of. Well, I mean, I know, but it's
Yeah.
not like hostile. They're not sitting there torturing
It's
people.
it's not torture-y in the way that you might
Right.
think going in.
Yeah, it's
Right.
got a very like 70s kind of like, cult type of feel to it. And yeah, I mean, I think that just kind of adds to the atmosphere of how creepy the clown is, because he's really the only not even the really fleshed out character, but he's I don't know, he's really interesting. So I enjoyed it.
Casey,
So, part of this is showing my age. This is a gore flick through and through. And I found after watching this, those just don't appeal to me as much. I don't have a problem with them, and I don't think they're like degenerate or anything like that. They just don't appeal to me that much. I had some concerns the first time I watched this before we started our discussions and stuff like that, just because it seemed like it was a lot of the violence was targeted certain ways. But you guys helped me realize that I'm probably reading too much into it. Once I got past that, this movie overall, I enjoyed it. I really like the atmosphere that they struck up in this movie. It's got a really great kind of 70s grindhouse feel to it without them putting the fake imperfections in the film and stuff, which you typically see when they make that kind of movie. And even the plot felt kind of similar to one of those movies with the way it unrolled. So, and those, I think it was really well put together. It's not one that I necessarily would go back and watch again. And just because some of that stuff was a little over the top for me. But again, that's personal taste. It's not taking away from the filmmaker and what he was going for.
Joe.
Yeah, I probably tend to veer towards Casey's opinion on this. When I first watch it, when I was first watching it, I was kind of down on it. Like, it really wasn't hitting me very well. And I think probably because when we watched the trailer, I was kind of in the camp where I thought we were going to get more of like a torture-y type movie. But like the further I get away from it and the more I think about it, I definitely want to go back and watch this again. But I ended up, I think liking it a decent amount. It definitely has like a good throwback to like those 80s and even maybe like late 70s horror movies that you would like find in a VHS store and just rent it based on the box alone. Like,
Right.
I don't know why, but Toolbox Murders kept like popping in my head during this. Like, it has like that same sort of gritty vibe to it.
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
Like, I think, the director obviously was kind of nodding to a lot of those movies, and I think he does a great job. So, overall, like I said, we'll talk about, like, the acting isn't great. This is definitely not a high budget film by any means, but, I think for like real horror fans, which I don't mean that in like a, like if you don't like this, you're not a real horror fan, but like folks who, can kind of appreciate those and kind of miss some of those days. Like, I think this would be a really good movie for them.
Yeah. The preface to my review, Joe, is that for like a month now on the show, you've been telling me that I'm an old man who shouldn't have a horror podcast anymore. And it's funny and I laugh, but like it's got me a little shook as well. So
It
like
feels a lot longer than a month, though.
yeah,
I feel
probably.
like.
But like going into this movie, I'm like, you know what? I am not gonna be a dad when I review this movie. I'm not gonna be like
Right.
I'm not gonna be just like a stick in the mud over it horror fan. I'm like I'm gonna like really give this a shot. So I like really got myself into the mindset. I watched it. I kind of got a little space, so I was alone, just hanging out, low lights. I loved this movie. Like,
Yeah.
loved it in a way that I really wasn't expecting to. And I think that it just makes a lot of smart decisions all the way through. Like, there's things that are really strong about it. The dude who plays the clown is, to me, like a brilliant physical actor. He's
Yeah,
like
he's awesome.
he's incredibly menacing and scary, but also manages to weave in these really like really strange comedic moments that work, and then he's able to flip it back on a dime to being scary. I think that it's directed incredibly well, especially for a low budget thing. There are tons of the really subtle, I don't even know if I would call them homages as much as just like learning things from classic horror movies, right? Like there are actually some little musical cues from Halloween, like not little notes and little instrumental sounds that are like straight out of Halloween. There are moments that remind me like Friday the 13th or something like Maniac when it starts getting really crazy. And it's just really, it's really intense. Like there's just even the scene that we'll talk about like early on where they're in this pizza place and he just strolls in with his bag, his bloody bag, and it's Halloween night. So like nobody's really thinking twice about it except these girls that have already seen him once. And he just does this whole fucking creepy, weird clown routine thing.
Yeah,
that was really
I would
like
have lost it.
It was creeping me the hell out, and it's really funny too because the one girl doesn't take it seriously. She's kind of drunk and she's taking selfies with him, and it's like part of the brilliance is his the prosthetic makeup on his face. It's like prosthetics to give him this really bizarre shaped face that almost looks a little like the Tin Man. Like his nose reminded me of the Tin Man from The Wizard of Oz, and then there's clown makeup over the top, so it's like it almost looks like that's what his face is like, and it's this very unsettling thing. I think that there are moments where this thing could have gone off the rails, and every time I think the director makes a smart decision. Like a half an hour in, our main final girl for most of the movie gets caught by him and wakes up in a warehouse, and he's like unsheathing a bag full of tools, and I was like, this is the moment where this movie is either gonna become unwatchable in some like really, you know, dated Saw bullshit, or they're gonna find a way out of it. And instead she kind of breaks out, and the rest of the movie really continues to be about the suspense of the chase. And he catches people, and when he catches them, he murders the F out of them in like incredibly violent ways. It's very gory, but I think because it's directed so well, it's got that 80s vibe. Like, I think that it works. It's a kind of gory that works. You know what I mean? Like when I watch something like, I hate to be so down on Adam Green for like 4 weeks in a row, but when I watch something like Victor Crowley, where there's just the movie itself is just a poopy turd. And then and then he's got 20-second long gore scenes where they're just spraying blood out of some bad prosthetic. You're like, this isn't really doing it for me. But here, where it's already so intense and they kind of have you amped up, is it gratuitous? 100%. But it doesn't it doesn't take me out of it because I feel like it's just part of the whole package, you know?
It didn't feel cheap, like
right.
No,
Right.
It doesn't feel cheap, and it kind of gives you this reprieve where there's so much that it's not comedic, like Adam Green tries to do in Victor Crowley, but it's enough that you're like, okay, it's not so realistic that I'm super freaking out just watching it. So yeah. I really liked that juxtaposition of the over the top gore with the like super creepy, kind of stalking scenes.
Yeah, like it impressed me because it's been a long time since I've seen a movie that's done something like this, and I wasn't just rolling my eyes at it.
Right.
And I think it was because I was so in on the suspense from the beginning that I was able to give it a lot more leeway than I typically do.
Well, we've had this argument before, and I think a large part of it too is because he relied heavily on practical effects versus like CGI and stuff, which made it good. But it also fits because if you look at the director Damien Leone, if you look at his credits on IMDb, he's got a lot more makeup and special effects department credits than he does director credits. So I could see where he would pull that kind of love in for that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, that scene that you talk about, Eric, like where he captures the sort of final girl character, like that 100% was like kind of the turning point for me too, because I mean, pretty much the movie opens with him filling up this garbage bag full of like, scalpels and like little saws and like all this stuff, and like when they show her kind of tied to this chair, I'm like, all right, here we go, like here comes Hostel Part 3, and like they really kind of take it not to like a different place, but like they don't go for like the cheap,
No, it's very psychological, and the violence is very I don't know, it's very directed towards the plot. Like it's never excessive to the point of like of being gratuitous. It's very much like this is happening because we're moving the plot along, and this is like even more terrifying.
I mean, it's funny because that scene actually ends up still being really scary.
Sure.
Because I mean, there is actually some violence and there's like maybe a little bit of torture, but he does this thing where he's first kind of approaching her, and it's like so tense because he's been so scary up until this moment, and he pump fakes at her like literally. For A, it's just scary, but B, as somebody who grew up with an older brother who constantly did that to him, it's like I felt this thing in my gut where I was almost like flinching at my desk, you know?
Totally.
I really want to talk about, I guess not too much of a spoiler, but I kind of, at first I didn't really feel too supportive of like how there was a little bit of a jump in time back and forth between the beginning and the end of the movie. But I have to say, I'm glad that the director has such a background in practical effects, because the actual final girl's makeup is amazing.
That's crazy.
And I think I really liked that not only do we get a character, so we get a villain who doesn't really have any background, any fleshing out, any like motivation, and we don't, the movie doesn't start like Joe said, the movie starts with him just putting all this stuff in a bag, and we don't really hear like what's really going on until we get this like montage of something else happening. And I really liked that was the route they took.
It's one of the things that makes it feel old school, right? That's like when I talk about something like Maniac. Like the original Maniac is just a movie about a literal maniac walking around murdering women, right? And I think that, like I love that you don't get anything here, because what story are they going to give me about a scary clown that's going to even do this guy justice? And it makes him way scarier to not have the backstory.
Well, I like that when you
Oh,
go ahead.
Casey.
I was going to say, though, that also with like the makeup that Cece's talking about in the beginning that kicked off this stuff and whatnot, we had to maybe get a little glimpse before all this happens of the clown, but he's not a major part of it. And this thing goes kind of off the rails in the first 5 minutes with this opening interview here in this makeup job that Cece's talking about, which for me is super effective, especially with a lot of the horror movies we've been watching for the last few months, which are kind of more formulaic and everything. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, Jesus, they've started there. Where are we going next?
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like
thrilling.
It's not super pertinent to the plot. I mean, it is sort of, but it's more about, you could tell they just felt like they needed a punctuation in the beginning, because otherwise it's almost a half an hour before much of anything happens.
Sure.
And it's a little unfortunate too, because like in the very beginning, and this is just a pet peeve of mine, but like fake news segments, like the actress who plays the host is like maybe one of the worst actors in the movie. So you're starting off with just a really awful performance. I mean, what I was saying over email is like the performances that matter are spot on. I think the final girl, even her friend, is sort of works in her own way, the kind of like drunk ditzy friend, and then the clown guy, right? And those are the really key things. But then you start off in the beginning with a couple of these background actors that are just like, I compared them, and specifically to me the hero of this film, which is Bug Bomb guy, a tragic hero, let's call him. He reminded me literally of like an extra from Clerks, like somebody who comes in to buy milk in Clerks or something, just like a goofy, like he knows he's not a good actor, but he's just kind of rolling with it. Like he just wanted to listen to heavy metal and bomb that house, which by the way, he's not wearing a mask or gloves or anything.
No.
Yeah, when he's smoking a cigarette while he's doing it, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's number one a no-no.
I don't know what it was. It was something about that dude's performance, but I like legitimately loved that character.
That also wasn't bombing a house, just for the record.
No, he's just spraying, like that's the shit you do when you have ants or something, you know?
He's doing bug stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's doing bug stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I think to your point, like the thing I appreciate about this movie was it only runs at about like an hour, 24 minutes. And I think you mentioned like a half an hour in is where like you kind of start to get the gore, but like they introduced the clown like right off the bat.
Yeah.
So from 5 minutes in, like we're kind of in that the pizza shop area, and like the tension is already there, and then from there on for like the next hour and 20, like it doesn't really let up. And I think looking back at some of those movies that we talked about from like the 80s and like late 70s, the thing that always bugged me as a kid is like, as you know, like a teenager who's watching horror movies, like you don't give a shit about the plot. Like you just want to see like people getting murdered and like the actual quote unquote like horror elements. And I feel like this movie did a really good job of like just cutting out all the meat and just diving right into like the spooky shit that's going on.
I mean, yeah.
See,
Go ahead, Casey.
That's weird. Well, that's weird because to me this movie felt over long, and I brought this up in email. It felt like it was a little too long for me, and talked about how like I felt like they could have edited down the pizza shop scene, stuff like that, which you guys all loved. And I think maybe it's because there's a certain scene in this movie, a certain kill that happens in the middle there that kind of splits this movie down the middle for me. And from that point on, I was completely uncomfortable and disturbed. And maybe that's why I thought it was too long. I don't know. I had a hard time with that one for some reason.
I really think the first act has a ton of awesome atmosphere. Like the first act is, and I guess what I could see is that because the shit really starts going down at a half an hour, I mean, you've then got almost an hour of just chasing, right? So like I could see a point where that might feel like a little much, but I was pretty in on the beginning, I think. And it's only like an hour 26 or something like that, right?
Yeah. You know what's funny is there's not a ton of jump scares either, like in all of that. And in this type of movie where we're just watching people being chased around, like I feel like that would be an easy out to just have him popping from, you know, like behind cars and around corners and stuff. But like they really don't go there, which is kind of impressive for a movie like this.
Well, and he's really effective too to that point, because there's when they first meet him and stuff like that, and he's just standing in a doorway staring at him.
Yeah.
And it's creepy as fuck.
It's super creepy. I mean, I think that and I think I kind of mentioned this in email. Like, I really appreciate that there's a nuance to his character that is really, I mean, it's really well balanced, because, I mean, a 2-minute extra long scene could have really turned this into something like over the top and cheesy or just like ridiculous. But even when he's chasing, you know, his victims, there's, I don't know, it's to his character that he is more of a clown, and like that's what he gets off on, is like actually chasing them and not just, you know, for the hell of it torturing them. So I thought that was really clever and well thought out.
Yeah.
He does it for the halibut.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned in the chat a minute ago, Joe, that this guy was a mime before.
Yeah, he's awesome.
It really speaks a lot, because I think that's one of the things that makes this clown so effective. And to your point, Cece, about how it was like a minute or two from being cheesy and over the top, this clown is silent the entire movie.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
that's really what sets it apart.
Yeah, even when he gets hurt, or like when he's in like a physical altercation with one of the victims, he never makes a sound. And like all of his, I mean, he only makes facial expressions or kind of like over exaggerates things like a mime. And that itself is super terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, it's so well done that I was thinking like during the movie that like this character already feels to me more iconic than a lot of these low budget slashers that are trying to like produce, like really consciously trying to produce an iconic character. Whereas like they're not forcing that aspect of it down your throat, but they're just doing everything around it so well that it feels that way. Like I would love to see another one of these movies.
Yeah, I would totally watch another one of these movies. And I agree with you, Eric. I think that like this has like, it has such a cult foundation. Like, you know, if it were real life, like you can see like this is the type of story that you hear about, like, you know, when you finally get old enough to go out on Halloween night, you know, your older sibling is telling you like, well, you better watch out. Like there's this fucked up clown that's going to come around and, you know, terrorize you.
His name is Art.
Yeah, his name is Art.
His name is Art.
It does pretty decent at like the Halloween atmosphere too, even though there are barely any extras in this movie, right? You never see like they're coming from a Halloween party, but you never see the party. They're just in costume, but he still sort of nails that feeling somehow. I'm not even sure how he kind of accomplished it, but
What's
it
funny
was,
is
it was the jack-o'-lanterns that he makes in
The-
the pizza parlor.
Did you just say
well,
that?
apparently like the jack-o'-lanterns were like CGI'd in after.
Oh, really?
because,
Oh.
Funny.
Like the director didn't think that the movie felt Halloween-y enough.
Yeah.
It was a nice touch.
Yeah, I liked him.
So we're not gonna like kind of give away everything, but I want to get into a little deeper into some other aspects. So we will drop, I think, a little bit of a spoiler warning now, since we're getting into like second act stuff. So there you go, guy who emailed last week. There's your spoiler warning. Hey Joe.
Yeah.
I love all our listeners. Do you want to talk about the most controversial aspect of this movie?
Which one are we talking about?
The
The
gun.
one that the which one?
The gun.
Oh, so it's
This is the aspect of this movie that tore the BGH podcast apart.
So the one thing I loved about this movie is we're kind of following this character who we assume is going to be the final girl throughout the whole thing, and like we said, she kind of gets kidnapped. She ends up getting, escaping, and then like midway through the movie, she ends up getting killed. I think my problem with this
With a-
was
with a
we
gun.
With a gun.
She gets murked.
Like we see him at the beginning, like loading up this bag with like all these different tools and like creepy shit that he's gonna use, and then for some reason, like out of nowhere, he just pulls a gun out of there and shoots her in the face like 5 times.
Okay,
Which-
so here's
yeah.
why I love that, and I think Cece's with me on this. Like
Yeah.
this, I just think, like I said in the beginning, this guy made so many interesting decisions and like keeps you on your toes during this movie. And it's this scene where he's been chasing her for a while. They've had a couple confrontations. She's pretty beat up, and he's like reaching in his bag to kind of find something to finish her off with. And like literally, it's great. I mean, it's so much of it too is the guy's performance, because he's like slowly rooting around the bag, and all of a sudden he just goes bam and like whips his gun out and like shoots her, and you're like, what? Like to me that's brilliant, because the last thing on earth I thought was going to happen at this point, you're like 45
Right.
minutes into the movie,
Yeah.
for him to reveal he has a gun. And I think it plays to Cece's point about he's just playing with them, and he doesn't really whip out the gun until he's like, okay, I need to like nip this shit in the bud right now. You know
Well,
what I mean?
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
That's-
very much like you see all these, stereotypical, villain movies, or like, a Bond movie. The villain starts telling them their entire like plan, and while that's unfolding, is where they get, they have their upheaval. And it was so like, I don't know, it was so perfect, because you could tell he was like, okay, this is the end of the rope. I'm tired of this, and I'm just gonna end it. And it
I
was,
guess. I mean, it's a good way to look at it. To me, it just felt like kind of cheap that he had all this stuff he could have done, and then he just like, all right, I'm going to shoot you in the face. Like, that's it.
I'll tell
Yeah.
you the reason why it bugged me a little bit, because we talked about the makeup on this clown and the way he looked, and if some of the shots that showed up close, what really set it off for me is if you looked at his mouth, like in the diner scenes
Oh.
they showed him, and he just didn't look really human underneath there. And it ties into the end of this movie, but I really bought into kind of a supernatural aspect of this clown, since we're in spoiler territory.
Yeah.
And the ending kind of brings that to a head. But throughout this whole movie, I fell pretty easily into thinking this is something supernatural and not a dude in a clown suit. So when he pulled that gun out, it kind of ruined that image for me.
Well, I mean, how is that any different though than, Jason is semi-supernatural and he carries around a machete. So like, how is a machete any less like physical than a gun?
You're right. I mean, it's not a solid argument.
No,
but
listen,
that
listen.
set it off for
Listen,
me.
I get the argument, because I certainly had a moment
Yeah.
where it's just not as fun in the like
Yeah.
slasher
Yeah,
sense, right?
exactly.
And I had a moment where I was like, am I okay with what just happened? And then ultimately I just like, I don't know, I didn't see that. There's no way I could have seen that coming. That's why it was great. And again, it's like,
Yeah.
it's partially his delivery. Like he whips
Yeah.
it out like
That-
he's pulling out a trick flower that's going to shoot you the water or something. He's just like, "Bam."
Exactly. Well,
Did
and
you
like, had that
pause the
happened,
movie to think that over, Eric? Or like, did you like sit back and
Joe, my brain is capable of thinking very quickly.
Alright.
So
Well, I just like I picture you like watching this, like the laptop on your
Mm.
lap in like a recliner, and then like that scene happens and you like pause it and you have to like put it aside and you're just like,
just like-
I don't
that was
know.
cool.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's
I
cool.
don't know if I can do this anymore.
Yeah.
takes little notes on this notepad.
But no, I did think about it, because normally I feel like in other movies I would have had the same reaction, but for whatever reason I didn't hear.
I mean, it didn't kill the movie for me. It's weird. And I'm jumping back now. Like when I first watched this, I was like, I did not care for this. And then like the more we talk about it, and especially like over email, and I honestly think like your excitement over this, Eric, kind of like caught me up too. Like,
I'm
you know,
really
Yeah.
surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Um,
I mean,
You know
Like,
why,
I-
Actually,
Joe?
I've come around on
You know
some
why,
too,
Joe?
just
Because
talking
I'm
about
a-
this thing.
You know why, Joe? Because I'm a youthful, exuberant
he's
horror
not a
fan.
regular dad. He's a cool dad.
I'm a
I
cool.
think the correct term right now is social media influencer.
Yeah, I'm a cool horror fan, Joe, who definitely loves gory, crazy movies still.
don't write checks that your hairline can't cash, Eric.
That's not cool, Joe. Why'd you have to bring that into it?
It's funny though, because Eric talks about how he's like, a cool horror fan that's still into super gory movies. I don't know why it really stood out to me, but the blonde ditzy girl and her demise really
I mean,
bothered me.
I get it.
It's a
Like,
little
I'm not gonna-
much. It's a little
Yeah,
much.
It was a little much. I'm not trying to downplay that by any means.
Yeah.
But I just, I think that I knew it was going to be gory, so I was like, okay, I'm prepared for it. And then when it happened, I was like, oh, because I was ready to fast forward through it. And
Yeah.
then
Well,
I started seeing it happen, and I was like, oh,
ultimately,
okay, like, I can watch
Yeah.
this.
ultimately for me too, it's the fact that it's not tortury. Like
Yes,
it's,
Yeah.
it's,
A
bru-
hundred
it's,
percent.
it's brutal
You're
as
totally
hell.
right.
It's brutal as hell
Yeah.
and disgusting, but it's
Yeah.
not lingering. It's just like, let's do this,
No,
and they
it's,
show it
it's
to you, and
over
then
like in a few seconds.
you move on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Maybe for me, it's
100%. That's
maybe
my
for me,
opinion.
it's something that we haven't seen something quite that extreme in a long time, especially in the context of the show. It
That's
just
true.
caught me off guard, and just afterwards, it's like, oh my god, that doesn't seem like it's right.
I feel I
that's-
feel
that's a
reborn
va-
as a horror fan, Joe, like a phoenix from the ashes.
Wow.
It's a valid point. Like, when is the last time we've seen a
I don't-
movie like
Well,
this?
because
Like,
we're old and we
yeah.
avoid this shit.
Well, I mean, so the last movie I remember even we saw Jigsaw, but that's so
nothing,
cheesy,
really.
like it doesn't count. So,
This movie is more hardcore than Jigsaw.
oh, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
definitely agree.
We
That
haven't even.
said, I can appreciate the shots that they had later when they came back through the room, and you see this girl
Yeah,
still
you
hanging in
see
the
it.
background. I appreciate that. It's like, oh shit, they really went there, and it was
Yeah.
kind of cool. But
Oh, when he
Well,
takes
and-
like the freaking selfie with her.
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and even when he kills the homeless lady, or like basically the hermit who lives in the basement, like I appreciate that, like, it happens, and like, yes, there's a bit of a like Buffalo Bill Silence of the Lambs moment afterwards, but it's so, I don't know, it's so skewed because it's literally not a close-up of him wearing this woman. He's like kind of in the back,
He's like,
like being a weird clown, and you're kind of like, I don't know what's more creepy, the fact that he's wearing someone's skin or that he's just being this terrifying
well,
clown.
so we haven't even mentioned this lady who, like, she,
Yeah.
this is like a derelict building, and she's like a mentally ill homeless woman who's carrying
Mhm.
around like a little baby doll and talking to it, and has some creepy moments with our characters. Like, she goes most of the movie, at least half of it, without even knowing that the clown's there doing his deeds. Like, she
Right.
kind of hears
Yeah.
some stuff, but then later in the movie she walks in on it happening, and then she's really freaked out. I thought she was really unsettling and scary, and
Mhm.
and leads to me one of the most effective moments in the film, which is this really bizarre emotional scene with her and the clown, where they sort
Yeah.
of like, and then it's just funny because you don't know like where it's gonna go, and the next time you see her, she's just been
Yeah.
eviscerated.
I thought
Yeah.
for sure. I thought for sure, pretty much up until we saw her corpse on the floor, that we were getting into like some kind of
Yeah.
Mama Firefly situation.
I thought they
from
were
Right.
gonna. I thought
1,000
they were
Corpses.
gonna. They were gonna team up. I thought.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought that
Yeah,
they
for
were
sure.
like she was actually his mom, and they'd been hiding out in that basement or something.
Yeah,
But I think that that's a really interesting moment too, is when you have this kind of this pseudo emotional scene. I call it emotional. I mean, he kidnaps her baby doll, and she's super emotional, and she's trying to like appeal to his, humanness, hopefully, that he has somewhere. So she's trying to just get the baby doll back, and she kind of like halfway embraces him. And it's this moment that I'm like, okay, this too could have been really, really cheesy if it turned into like this weird mom complex, and
Yeah.
it's going to be that's why he's killing all these women. But instead, it doesn't go there. He just kills her too, and
Yeah.
you're like, oh,
But it doesn't. It almost like in a way like it doesn't invalidate the weird little moment they have.
Sure.
It's just kind of is where it ended up. But it's a really weird. It's a weird thing, and it's difficult to pull off, right? Like I've seen it in
Yeah.
other horror movies, not done as well. And again, it's just I think a big factor of just like how good this dude is, this clown man,
Yeah.
clown man.
man clown.
Part of
Clown man.
the thing I struggled with my opinion in this movie when we started discussing it this morning, and I brought up how it seems kind of like some of the traits that they bring out on like CSI Miami or something when they're profiling a serial killer or something like that. It seemed early on that like he was kind of really had a problem with women because he was targeting very feminine parts of it. They was going after the final girl's face. He was going after the one lady's breast. He would, split the one lady down the middle, starting at the split. They,
No, Casey, no.
but it seemed like it was really targeted towards women, and I didn't know if I should feel bad at that or not. But at the same time, after I'll be honest, I was waiting for CC to let me know if I should be offended or not, just because I needed that feminine perspective. But at the same time, I could see why it wasn't. And it's interesting too, because the reason I made that comment about like the cop shows, detective shows and stuff, because when they're profiling these killers, a lot of times when they have mom hangups and sexual hangups and stuff that are motivating these killings that they're going on with serial killers, that they tend to target those type of feminine traits in their victims and stuff like that. So as I got farther away from this movie and after we started discussing, I started thinking that actually kind of fits a character in that aspect too, if he was doing that. And like we all said, that he wasn't going after them just because they're women. They just happen to be there.
I think there's a logic to it. I also think that like that internal conversation that you're having as a 2018 horror fan is like super relatable. I think especially for
Oh, for sure.
especially for men who just like are trying to open themselves up to these points of view, but also it's like here's this thing you love, and it's like that battle of you want to make sure everything's on the level, right? Or like you're not missing a context to what you're watching. I think part
we've
of
all
it
had that moment where we've watched a movie and we thought, oh, that was really cool. Then we happened to turn to Twitter or something like that, and we found out, oh no, that was really bad.
I think
it was
part
really
of it,
misogynistic or something.
part of it is like, and I don't know if this excuses that type of stuff, but like when it's so well done, it feels earned in a way that like a cheaper film. Sometimes you see movies where there's just zero artistic talent behind it, and it seems
Well-
like a means to an end to just get to do these things on camera, and it
Yeah.
doesn't. It doesn't. This doesn't feel like that, and I can't necessarily quantify why that is, but it doesn't feel cheap or exploitative like in that way.
Well, because like I was kind of saying earlier, like to me, it doesn't feel like it's directed towards one party. I mean, you have everybody getting killed. I mean, granted, I felt like the two girls were targeted because they were like the friend was egging him on. Like
Yeah.
she was kind of like, she was kind of, like egging him on when they first meet, and then even in the pizzeria, she's kind of being super obnoxious to him. So
Yeah.
like, there's a motivation as to why he's doing something to them, and then the consequences move the plot along as opposed to just being over the top gratuitous or just it's not a victim of lazy writing. Like somebody obviously said, this is our character, this is where I want him to get to, and this is how he gets there, rather than just take the easy route.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, I mean, it really stands out in hindsight as I get further away from this movie and we start discussing it. You look back on it. He didn't target them because they were female. They were in the wrong place at the wrong time when they first ran into him and things like that. Bottom line, though, I think it's still a lot of credit due to the director and writer, who is the same dude, because he made this movie because he wanted you to watch this movie and come out disturbed. And if you have conflicting thoughts like that, he's achieved his point.
Oh,
without
I
actually
also-
being hateful about
listen,
it, which I think is impressive.
Listen, it's also important to point out, I think, that like you can make a movie where a killer targets women, because like guess what? You ever watch like a 2020 or something? Like that
Yeah,
shit
like, that
happens all the time.
Yeah, it's totally real.
I think where the distinction starts to happen, like we're talking about though, it's in the execution. And that is and that's like a gut thing. It's really just how you interpret and take something in the moment of watching it, making that decision for yourself how you're going to feel about it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think it's a lot of credit too that he didn't go the hostile route, as we've all talked about, and gone the torture porn route.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I mean, kudos to him.
Absolutely. I think this film avoids pitfalls at like several really key junctions, and every time it kind of was making the right decision, I was getting like more behind it.
Yeah, definitely.
Word.
Guys,
Word.
Terrifier.
Yep.
This movie legitimately scared me. I like had to take my dogs out afterwards, and I was like looking over my shoulder things.
I'm at home a lot by myself, and I'm a little unsettled.
What's Kyle doing? What's
Well,
he
he's
up
home
to?
right now, but he works all the time. What do you mean? You know,
No, just mean like in general, like what's he doing?
What's he wearing?
Yeah, what's he
right
wearing?
now? He should be packing because we're going on a trip tomorrow. So
Let's go.
How does he? Could you describe his general smell right now? For Joe?
It's a little oaky, and there's some
Like a
charcoal.
like a
Where are you guys
musk.
going?
We're flying into Phoenix, and we're driving from Phoenix to the Grand Canyon, and then from the Grand Canyon to Joshua Tree, because he is going to a generator party on Saturday.
You know,
I don't know what any of that just meant, but cool.
Wait, is there like a band playing at this generator party?
Yes, there
Oh,
are several
God.
bands. But dude, it's awesome. So he'll be mad that I can't remember the name of this like show that's happening. But you pay this flat fee, and they cover your water, your drinks, your food, like everything all day.
That's awesome. I gotta remember. I'll send you guys this. No, this shouldn't even be on the show. But there's this documentary about like all like the old desert sessions and like
Oh yes.
the stoner metal that like all started out there, and they talk about like all these generator parties and stuff.
Yes,
It's
that's
really
why we're going.
Am I to understand that a generator party is like a party out somewhere without electricity that's all run on generators?
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty much like these bands started like way outside of like LA in like like around like the Joshua Tree and like that area, and
yeah.
they couldn't play, like there was no like bars or anything that would let them play, so they would pretty much just like drive out in the middle of the desert and have these parties, and like the entire thing would be powered by generators, like, and that's how they start.
So
I'm
it's all
glad
like
Eric asked
stoner.
that question and I didn't have to be the old man. 'cause
Yeah,
I
no,
wasn't
you guys,
the
like
first.
stoner
you guys,
rock
yeah,
kind of
you guys
metal
were
out
using
there.
some like cool kid lingo. I'm not up on. So
Once Joe mentioned the desert sessions, I knew about Queens of the Stone Age at their desert sessions, so I was on board.
all right,
Yeah.
guys,
Cool.
back on the rails. Terrifier.
Yes, sir.
Would you recommend it, Cece?
Yes, definitely.
Casey,
Yeah.
Jojo.
I would say to like a horror fan, but this is probably not one that you would just grab your significant other and sit down and watch on a Friday.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe not if they're not into horror, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna say hell yeah, man. This movie's awesome. Check it out. All right, guys, take a quick break and do some fan mail.
Some say the world will end by fire. Others say it will end by ice. Now, somewhere in the Antarctic, the question is being settled forever. John Carpenter's The Thing. Coming this summer from Universal Pictures.
Hello, this is Jeremy Gardner. I'm the writer, director, star of The Battery, and you're listening to Bloody Good Horror.
Send your emails to info@bloodygoodhorror.com or hit us up on Twitter at BGHorror with the hashtag AskBGH. And don't forget to pick up back episodes of the show at podcast.bloodygoodhorror.com.
And we are back. Joe, I have great news.
Wait, I was muted. Yeah, go for it.
Terrifier qualifies for 2018 lists.
All right.
Yes.
I've got him.
What's up, Joe? It's been so long since we saw something I like this much. I don't remember anything on my list. Can you tell me?
So your best of right now is Annihilation, Unsane, The Strangers Pray at Night, A Quiet Place, and then you jump all the way down to 9 and 10 with The Ritual and Cloverfield. So you left 6, 7, 8. Like you left 4 open in the middle.
Let's put this at number 2 and bump everything down.
Ooh.
Wow.
Impressive.
Bold move, friends.
Yeah. All
I
right.
like it.
You know, so much of our list ends up being theatrical that when I see something indie like this on video and I like it this much, I feel like, you know, it's like a Black Coat's Daughter kind of situation where I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah.
this movie, I want to like champion this movie. So like, let's put it up there.
All right.
Nah, mean.
If not-
Not mean.
me.
Not me.
Info at bloodygoodhorror.com
No, I'm saying.
is the email address. Joe, I was gonna mention this earlier when we were talking about beers, but like, I'm feeling pretty good lately. I'm considering trying to get into some gluten-free beer again. So
Ooh.
I want to put a shout out if any listeners have good recommendations. If they live in
Yeah.
if they live in gluten hell like I do, and they have a recommendation, let me know.
I do not, but I'll be interested to hear what you think.
Sean says, lately I've been
Hey, Sean.
catching up on some of my blind spots in popular horror franchises. Which horror movie franchises? Which horror movie franchise, singular, do you think contains both one of the best and one of the worst movies you've ever seen? My vote's for The Exorcist. Like many horror enthusiasts, I've always thought the original was so good it elevated the genre, but I recently watched The Exorcist 2, The Heretic, and my oh my, what a pile of dog shit that is. It has earned its place on some lists of one of the worst movies ever made. Thoughts? Sean in Korea.
Yeah, that's not a bad call. I mean, part 2 is such a weird jump.
You know, part 2 is one
Yeah.
of those funny movies, though, where I feel like I see it more and more listed on, like, guys, you should give this movie a chance because it's weird in, like, a fun way. You know, like, sometimes I think it's weird in such a unique way that it's one of those things that, you know, sometimes those movies find their audiences years later.
I don't think that's one of them.
I would like to say I haven't. So my answer is Candyman, because I
Ooh.
think
That's
I
a
think
good one,
I think
too.
Candyman's like a potential like top 10 all-time horror film, and yet like literally straight into this first sequel, it's just off a ledge garbage. So like
Yeah.
I think that's probably my answer.
I'd go a little more obscure, and I would go with the Feast franchise.
Sure.
Because I
Cool.
thought the first one was really good, but the 2 after that were just not very good at all.
I might say Jaws too, like Jaws in general. But
Yeah,
by the
that's fair.
time you get to Jaws 4, where they're like the shark has followed his wife to like the Caribbean to get revenge or something.
I don't know, man. Michael Caine hitting on his wife is still pretty solid.
Michael Caine has a great quote out there somewhere about how like the movie's terrible, but the house that he bought with his paycheck was great or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
I
there you
don't
go.
know. It's got its charm.
Yeah.
don't-
Also, Sean, I don't know if Sean's ever written in before, but I'd love to know what it's like being a horror fan in Korea. Like, what I assume he's Western with the name Sean, but maybe not. But like, do you get theatrical movies out there? If so, are they mostly Korean or do you get American stuff? I'd love to know like what that looks like from that end. So let us
Yeah.
know. Hit us up.
'Cause, I mean, we have seen a couple really good Korean horror flicks, but
yeah,
yeah,
for
I'd be curious to see how much they're influenced by the Western flicks.
For what it's worth, honestly, too, like we have a lot of listeners in different countries. I would love to know generally just anybody, if you live in a place where getting horror is, you know, a weird to do, just let us know. Info at Bloody Good Horror. Next up, Steven. I appreciated the critical review of the movie Winchester in episode 471. I saw it in theaters. I'm going to skip some of this because it gets a little spoilery, so I'm going to try to, so it might be a little fumbly, but I saw the movie in theaters when the shootings in Las Vegas were still making headlines.
Jeez.
This shooting gave the film an ominous tone for me before viewing. I was hoping for some interesting views about gun violence and some stunning or some thoughts of the unique architecture in the Winchester house to both play a part in the script. The movie failed on both counts. The film gave up showing the hallways that twist and turn to nowhere by the second act. The script was filled with many typically ghost movie tropes that it didn't even bother to make any statements against gun violence. Spoiler. Except for the Vincent Price-like performance by Dame Helen Mirren, not Dame Judi Dench. The movie was a total waste of time. Joe's like, agree to disagree. Do you believe it is important for horror films to make some social statement when the subject allows it? Is there another horror film with a total lack of social conscience like Winchester that you can remember? Thank you for reading my email in episode 474. Black Cauldron, the dangerous toy song that I thought could be the official theme for BGH's Scared. Joe was right. I blame autocorrect and fat fingers. So there you go. Thanks for the entertaining podcast, Steve. So I've been thinking about this a lot because he sent this a few days ago. I don't think that like every horror film, and this is coming up a lot now, right? Because you have movies like Get Out and movies that actually are having an actively conscious voice about this stuff. Every movie doesn't have to have that. But I think the problem with Winchester is that when you're a bad movie, and especially on a show like this, like you open yourself up when you're a bad movie and you're tackling topics that even though it's a period piece are very relevant to today, and you have a built-in thing like this character feeling guilt over her family's association with guns, right? I think that's where the criticism of Winchester comes in. Like, does every movie need it? Absolutely not. But when you have such a natural setup and you whiff so hard, it's like we have to talk about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that, I think I completely agree with you because it wouldn't have bothered me as much if Winchester, if Winchester wasn't as bad. But the thing about Winchester that made me super frustrated is that, like you said, that's what the story is about. Like the whole house was built from the guilt of this widow. So it's like, why wouldn't you at least tackle that concept even during that time period? Like it doesn't have to be contemporarily relevant, but it was a whiff, and I don't know, that's the
right. I mean,
that was the most frustrating.
Tonight's a perfect example, right? Like even in the era of Get Out, like Terrifier still has a space to exist. I don't need Terrifier to be telling me anything deeper than murder.
Well, look,
but Winchester is a different thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, as a female who is very supportive of the Me Too movement, who has had experiences like that, I think that you can still enjoy a film for the fact of pure entertainment. But I do think that if that's the case and you're going to have things that are like controversial, you need to do them very thoughtfully and very well done, like, for it to not be misconstrued.
Or just know that like you're opening yourself up to criticism if you don't nail it. And like a lot of it is I think that horror has always been capable of, and there've always been movies that touch on social issues, right?
Oh, definitely.
But Get Out raised the bar. And in the era that we live in, you know, if you're going to broach those subjects, like you just have to know that a lot of people are going to consider the way you handle those subjects when they consider what they think of your movie.
Well, for sure. I think not only just, I think that we're in a time where everyone has a platform to share their opinion, and they're mostly going to do that. So regardless if you're trying to make a statement or not, you open yourself up to that when making art and putting it out in the world. And that's just a side effect of making the art.
Yeah.
If you're listening to
Joe,
old episodes.
Stand by. My computer just froze up again, which means the last 10 seconds are going to be a blank spot. So be quiet for a second, and then I'm going to toss it back to you.
Okay.
Okay, Joe, before you get too drunk to read the tweets, why don't we do some Twitter stuff?
Yeah, we're on the Twitters at BG Horror is our Twitter, and we use 2 different hashtags. The first one, if you're listening to an old episode and a quote or something tickles your fancy, you can use the hashtag BGH Classics. And we got a handful this week. First up from at Mi Corazon Mi Amor. She says, "The thing about my beard is that boners nestle quite well inside of this."
That was
and
Andy.
that was our good friend Andy,
Yeah.
yes, from the Jack Frost Spooktacular. That
Somebody
we did,
was on Slack yesterday talking about how ungodly attractive they find Andy.
that was also Mi Corazon Mi Amor.
That's amazing.
He
Yeah,
is very
shoot.
handsome.
He's
Yeah.
very handsome.
He's a looker. Another
So
one.
more or less handsome than Kyle, though.
Oh, not even close. Like Kyle,
I mean, Kyle's got that hair.
he's got the bot and the brain.
He's got the whole
Oh,
package.
God.
Yeah.
You asked.
I shouldn't have. I'm sorry.
I don't know.
Uh,
Kyle might be too pretty for me though. I think Andy's more my type. No offense.
Kyle will be so mad
Don't he-
that you called him pretty.
His hair is just so like perfectly coiffed all the time.
Oh.
I don't think I can talk about this anymore. This is gonna be like if like the next time Kyle and I like see each other and hang out, like it's gonna be like super weird, like the whole thing. Another one from Mi Corazon Mi Amor. How unbearable would Piranha 3D have been if it didn't have boobs in it? And that was and then yeah, so Eric wraps up with that one, and then John chimes in with or penises.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, like
you know-
the silly parts of that movie kind of make it the floating
Yeah.
floating wiener.
And for some reason, that was episode 177, Apollo 18, where we talked about that.
Do you remember that Christopher Lloyd is in Piranha 3D?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think what's more confusing is why were we talking about that on the Apollo 18
Why,
episode?
why not?
Next up from at Skizbot, Eric regarding the movie he reviewed on the podcast. This is the quote. "I heard there might be this film called Twilight coming out in November that we're definitely not going to be talking about."
Yeah,
that's-
I remember being very salty about Twilight at the time.
Well, it was episode 47, so
Yeah.
it was a while back.
You remember when we saw that little kid at Horror Hound who had a Twilight shirt on, and we gave him a Bloody Good Horror shirt to cover it up?
Yes, I do. I do. We also gave him a CD of episodes.
Yeah.
It's weird. Another one from Skizbot. This is Mark regarding springtime in Rochester, New York. It's like getting hit in the nutsack. It's like getting hit with a nutsack full of pollen right in the face.
Yeah.
Getting a pollen tea bag. That was episode 28, Frontiers.
My whole car is like covered in pollen right now.
Next up from at bjangles23. This is episode 355, The Final Girls. This is a quote from Eric. "Mark is the quiet nerd that makes Joe the slut."
I think we were talking about like slasher movie tropes.
Yeah. Well, I think in that movie, like they
Yeah.
kind of had everything. We were trying to figure out who was what.
Yeah.
Next up from at that baseball Joe. Let me know if we read this last week. I don't think we did. And this is I saw this in RPX. It was really delightful. The homeless guy and myself really enjoyed it. That was Eric Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunter.
Yeah.
I think we did read that one.
Yeah, we
We
read
did
that.
say that,
We
right?
read that one last week.
All right, we got one more from, and this I promised her I would read this, but she didn't give us the episode number. This is at Mary Was It Scary, and this is her PGH classic, and this is one from me that we unfortunately don't have the episode number, but it was just this is me talking to John. "It's called a sub, not a hoagie, you cousin fucker."
It's true.
And
And
we'll
Joe,
jump over and yeah, go ahead.
Joe has been known in the past to go in on Philadelphia from time to time.
Well, it's a
You
disgusting.
don't
joke.
say.
It's a garbage town. And then we also use the hashtag every week, AskBGH. That's where we post up and ask you to chime in with your questions or sometimes comments or just random nonsense. First up from Slanderous Gent. He says, "I always find it weird when you guys show your age, such as the last episode when Joe mentioned seeing Black Cauldron at the theater. And Mark, how the fuck have you not heard of Mice and Men?"
Yeah, it's a good question. We'll have to make sure to ask that again next week.
Which I assume he's talking about the band. Yeah, I don't know. It makes me feel weird to think that like I saw a movie in the theater that came out close to 30 years ago. Next up from this is also from @Mary Was It Scary. Are there any scenes you really like from the overall quote-unquote bad horror movie? I like the scene in Ghost Ship with the montage of how all the crew and passengers died, even though the movie itself is pretty bad.
I wasn't really able to think of one off the top of my head, but I feel like especially with the amount of bad theatrical stuff that we've had to review, there's always something that you're like, well, that one thing was okay, because like otherwise, what are you doing with your life if you can't? You got to find one thing, right?
I can always find a good scene to enjoy in a bad B movie, so that's kind of a broad topic, really. There's a lot of good stuff. You have to concentrate on things like the special effects or the kill that they set up or things like that to really appreciate them.
I agree. I mean, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I feel like anytime we watch like a really shitty movie, we at least have like one part where we're like, oh, well, that was actually really well done.
Yeah.
Next up from @_bad movie night. He or she asks, which one did it better, Bone Tomahawk or Terrifier?
I mean,
I don't really, honestly, nothing is in my brain. Nothing remains in my brain from Bone Tomahawk except that woman making breakfast. So I don't know what this is even a reference to.
Doesn't someone get like split in half?
I think somebody does get split in half.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's pretty
I'm gonna
gory too.
say Terrifier because I just saw it, but I remember watching Bone Tomahawk and being like, "Holy crap, this is intense."
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
I enjoyed that one a lot myself, but I think this one, the atmosphere around it was better.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like this one was a little not cheesy, but like you could definitely tell it was an effect. Whereas like Bone Tomahawk, I felt like was like you really could have believed that like they were actually cutting someone out. So
yeah, that Bone Tomahawk was very Cannibal Holocaust-ish.
Yeah. Next up from @GraveDiscSurd. Do you think Terrifier was successful in emulating elements of 80s slasher? Why or why not?
I think we covered it, but yeah, I think it actually really was. I just think that it takes a lot of really smart directorial and like creative cues from those movies to make it.
And it's not just the 80s either. It dips into the 70s too, like Eric said with Maniac and stuff.
Yep. Next up from @Skizbot. If you ever happen to knock a murderous, blood-covered clown unconscious, would you be an idiot that just runs and hides, or would you want to be someone who doesn't get their face smashed in by killing that clown? My God, kill the clown quick before he wakes up.
We joke about this a lot, right? Because about like, oh, I'd be the one to like run away. But I was thinking about this during this movie because there is at some point where you need to like, you get to that primitive thing where like it's life or death. You got to murder this person with nothing but your hands. And watching this movie, I was like, I think I could get there if I was scared enough.
I have a lot of pent up aggression, and I'm sure that once I hit that point, it would be like it would be very pulpish that was left.
I've definitely had nightmares about murdering people, and in my nightmares, I'm pretty good at it.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. @Captain Piranha. He says, do you think the number of kills by Art the Clown were enough to be considered as a proper quote-unquote comeback to the gore 80s slasher movies?
Sure. That is a fair point.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think this movie's going to spawn any sort of resurgence.
I mean, if there's a sequel, it's got you do need a higher body count, but I actually think they do a good job of getting enough ancillary characters in there to keep it interesting.
Yeah.
I think it's a nice throwback. I don't think we're going to see this as any sort of like, I don't think this is going to spawn a trend or anything.
I just think he means in general, like, do they kill enough people for this to be considered like in that same vein?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then last up from @StovelCody42, he or she says, how scared should we be that there's a Scientology channel now on DirecTV/YouTube on a level of 1 to 10?
Yo, I thought you were about to say a Scientology channel on our Slack, and I was about to be like, nope.
I mean, there could be like there could be before the end of this episode.
That's true. What's happening now?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Scientology always seems like a joke to me, but it's legit creepy.
I mean, it's interesting, but yes, it is definitely creepy and unsettling.
And when it all boils down, you don't have to watch it.
Yeah, that's true.
And that is it for tweets.
Love it. Guess what, Joe?
What's up, buddy?
It's 9:25.
All right.
Nailed
Let's
it.
go.
Nice work, everybody.
Yeah.
The podcast will live on because I don't have to quit this forever because I can't handle it. I'm
So
reborn.
you are saying
I
we should
think
fire John, right? Like, is that?
Well-
I think you've successfully proven yourself to be a cool dad.
Yeah. Not. Right. We don't know what we're doing next week. Keep an eye on Twitter. If you're a patron and you're in the Slack, we also post in the BGH Big Show channel once we have a solidified movie. We're going to be doing some stuff pretty soon, letting patrons vote on our movies since we're doing so many video things and we just have like a big hopper and can't always decide. So we're going to just fucking let people vote.
Yeah,
So
bro.
there it is. That's going to do it. Our show on Terrifier. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll talk to you next week.
See ya.
Okay, bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.